In a fully automated warehouse, work flowed at a steady pace. A machine approached to collect another order coming down the production line, a pressurized oxygen tank. And amidst all this technology, there was a single human supervisor watching the process with a weary look. He tried to give an instruction to one of the robots, but the machine didn't seem to process the request. The automaton simply asked him to repeat what he said. Ignoring the order, the robot simply stated that its function was to collect products, following its programming to the letter. Having lost his patience, the young man told the machine, named Pax, to just continue with its work. The robot then asked for permission to pass and went on its way. The supervisor sighed. Working surrounded only by machines definitely had its downsides. With mechanical politeness, the robot thanked him and continued its job of stacking boxes. The young man then wondered how a warehouse of that size could function with practically no real people around. At that moment, he was sure that accepting that job had been a big mistake. The place was gigantic, operated entirely by drones and robots. A cold and impersonal production line, where he was the only living soul. It was then that he remembered how it had all started, just 2 months ago, right after he left the army. At that time, he was full of hope, happy to have finally been discharged from military service. Freedom seemed like the best thing in the world, but the joy of being free didn't last long. An unexpected call was about to completely change his plans. It was his parents, warning him at the last minute that they were moving to another city. They left him alone in a small apartment, without much explanation. Abandoned to his own devices, he began to dream about the future. Maybe he could get a job as a barista and live a romance. Little did he know that reality would be much harsher. That whole optimism, however, didn't last long. The reality of having to find a job soon came knocking, and it wasn't gentle at all. He began his search for the dream of being a barista, going from coffee shop to coffee shop. But the answer was always the same. The coffee shop manager explained that they preferred to hire people with experience, something that the young man, fresh out of the army, obviously didn't have. A month passed in this frustrating search. Lying in bed, he realized that he couldn't even get a job as a waiter. Reality was being much crueler than he expected. Ventilating in the family group chat, he proclaimed himself completely useless. The response from his sisters was immediate and merciless. One called him an idiot, while the other questioned why he moved so quickly. The first sister didn't let up, calling Jong Gyeom a fool for not being able to get even a part-time job. The second, seeing her brother's idleness, invited him to go to her gym. He complained that their help wasn't really help. It was then that one of his sisters made a suggestion, a delivery company that used AI, a supposedly easy job. Desperate, Jong Gyeom wanted to know the name of the place, and so he got the job. But upon arriving at the huge warehouse and seeing the drones buzzing everywhere, Jong Gyeom felt a pang in his chest. He had the distinct feeling that he had made a mistake. What he didn't know was that his coworkers would all be robots. The service was really as easy as his sister said, but maybe it was a little too easy. The loneliness was already starting to hit. In the middle of that mechanical silence, he heard footsteps. Someone was approaching. Finally, a real person. It was a supervisor, who without even looking at him properly, told him to check if anything was missing from the warehouse inventory. The interaction was cold and direct. Jong Gyeom agreed and headed to the warehouse. Even with the boss's coldness, he gave a wry smile, thinking to himself. He thought about how that supervisor was a grumpy old man. At least he was a person, which was better than the drones. He arrived at the warehouse door. As he opened it, a creak echoed through the silent corridor. Upon entering, he came across a gigantic and dark warehouse. The shelves were lost in the immensity, and a heavy silence took over the place. Something there didn't seem right. The place was exactly as it should be, a gigantic warehouse, full of boxes and shelves that were lost in the darkness. A heavy silence dominated the environment. Suddenly, a metallic noise echoed through the warehouse. Jong Gyeom looked back, surprised, but didn't see anything out of the ordinary. He ignored the sound and went back to work, climbing on a ladder to organize a box. He grumbled that that item should be on the first floor, not up there. At that, Another creak made him stop. This time, the sound seemed much closer and clearer. He turned around just in time to see the only door to the warehouse slam shut. For a second, he stood paralyzed on the ladder, not understanding what had happened. Jong Gyeom hurried down and tried to turn the doorknob, but it didn't budge. The door was locked. He banged hard, shouting, but there was no response. It finally dawned on him. He was completely trapped inside. Desperate, he grabbed his cell phone. The first person he thought of calling was his supervisor, Mr. Shin, but he hesitated. Maybe it would be better to call emergency services. But he soon dismissed the idea, thinking it would be an exaggeration. After all, it wasn't like he was trapped in a freezer or in immediate danger. He decided that the best thing to do was wait. Someone would eventually come looking for him. If it took too long, then he would call 911. To pass the time, he sent a photo to his sister, saying he was trapped. She didn't believe him, thinking it was a joke and asking if he was playing escape room at work. Right after, the cell phone rang. It was her. Maybe now she would take him seriously. Jong Gyeom answered the call, already preparing to explain the situation. But, on the other end of the line, he only heard a continuous and annoying beep. No one was saying anything. He complained, saying his sister was too old to make prank calls. But before he could finish the sentence, a violent explosion threw him away. The explosion was just the beginning. Soon after, the emergency alarms went off throughout the complex, plunging the place into a deafening chaos and confirming that the danger was real. Dazed and not understanding what was happening, Jong Gyeom heard an order for immediate evacuation over the loudspeakers. All workers should go to the loading area. The message, however, was abruptly interrupted by another violent bang. Something had collapsed, blocking the way and cutting off communication. It was at that moment that panic began to take over. He realized the gravity of the situation. He was completely trapped. In desperation, Jong Gyeom pounded on the door, shouting that he was inside and asking for help. But no one answered. His only remaining hope was his cell phone. He quickly tried to call emergency services, hoping the signal hadn't dropped. But it was no use. The call wouldn't go through, and the device became useless in his hands. All exits seemed closed. Suddenly, he stopped. A sound from the other side of the door caught his attention, but it wasn't someone asking for help. It was violent and heavy banging, as if something was trying to break down the door to get in. The survival instinct screamed louder. Jong Gyeom froze in place, not daring to move or make any noise. At that moment, he had a terrifying certainty. Whatever was out there, it wasn't human. A single sound, and he would be dead. The fear was paralyzing. All he could do was huddle in the dark and wait, hoping the creature would go away. The sounds of destruction and the sirens continued for a while, until silence finally reigned. But no one came to rescue him. Time passed. Trapped in that warehouse, hunger and thirst became his new enemies. 3 days had already passed. Without rescue and without hope of leaving, Jong Gyeom accepted his situation. The only thing that mattered now was surviving. With supplies running out, the days dragged on slowly. The only thing that kept Jong Gyeom sane was the hope that his family was okay. He recorded his thoughts on his cell phone, a last message to a world he might never see again. It was a rant, a silent prayer. At least the silence was back. Without the deafening alarms, he could finally have a moment of peace, even if it was his last. But the fatigue and hunger took their toll. Exhaustion took over his body, and the device fell from his hand. And that's when something bizarre happened. A blue screen floated in front of him, breaking the monotony of the warehouse. The message spoke of a parallel dimension, a level 1 ability that could store any object in sight. It didn't make any sense. Jong Gyeom started laughing. After 3 days trapped, it was obvious. He had finally gone crazy. It was just a hallucination. He leaned back, accepting the vision as a symptom of his mind breaking down. If he was going to die there, he might as well have interesting delusions. But it wasn't a hallucination. In the blink of an eye, the warehouse floor disappeared beneath his feet. He found himself in the middle of a ruined city. The scene was of pure devastation, a nightmare he couldn't understand. Cars overturned, buildings destroyed, and bodies scattered across the street. The reality of that place was much more terrifying than the solitude of the warehouse. The smell of death was everywhere. Jong Gyeom looked at the face of a fallen man, and the horror of the situation finally hit him hard. Suddenly, the blue screen returned, announcing the start of storage. An overwhelming dizziness took over him, as if his mind was being invaded. He fell to his knees, powerless. The system reported that it had found a compatible operating system for the operation. An update bar appeared. Jong Gyeom watched the numbers go up, sweating cold. Whatever was happening to him, it was just beginning. As soon as the update finished, a chill ran down Jong Gyeom's spine. He felt an overwhelming presence, something that made him freeze in fear instantly. A gigantic shadow loomed over him, covering everything. He could barely understand what he was seeing, questioning whether it was real. And then, the source of the shadow revealed itself. A colossal creature, with fangs and red eyes, staring down at him. The personification of death. Faced with that monstrosity, Jong Gyeom felt completely helpless. Despair took over every fiber of his being. His mind tried to process the image, comparing the creature to anything he knew, like a gorilla or a bear, but he knew it was something much worse. Jong Gyeom's only hope was to stand perfectly still, hoping the creature wouldn't notice him. But that hope was crushed when the monster took its first step. The instinct to survive screamed louder. Without a second thought, Jong Gyeom turned and ran with all the strength he had left. A deafening roar echoed through the ruined city, a sound of pure fury and hunger that seemed to shake the very ground. He glanced back for a moment and saw the horror. The monster wasn't just chasing him, it was hunting, and it had already found another prey. With a single stomp, another person's life was extinguished. A brutal display of power that only increased Jong Gyeom's panic. His lungs burned and his legs ached. He didn't understand how, even with all the adrenaline, the monster seemed to be getting closer. He wasn't the only one running, but the distance between hunter and prey was decreasing every second. It was a race he was about to lose. Another scream was silenced. Jong Gyeom didn't even dare to look back. He just kept running, knowing he could be next. But then, amidst the chaos, he saw it. A bright light at the end of the street. A chance, an escape route. Hope rekindled with full force. He was almost there, salvation within reach, except the monster wasn't going to let him escape that easily. And it hurled something at him with absurd speed. Too late. The monster's projectile reached him. Despair took over Jong Gyeom as he realized he wouldn't make it to the light in time. But instead of the final impact, a blue light exploded, enveloping him completely. It wasn't the end he expected, but a wave of pure energy. He steadied himself in the light, confused, but alive. The attack didn't kill him. Something completely different was happening. For a moment, he didn't understand what had happened. Where was the pain? Where was the end? There was only silence and a strange sense of power. And then he saw it. The monster was standing still, unable to reach him, as if an invisible wall had appeared out of nowhere to protect him. Suddenly, a drone appeared beside him. A mechanical voice confirmed what seemed impossible. Jong Gyeom was the master of that parallel dimension, and nothing could enter without his permission. Master of a dimension? The information was too absurd to process. He could barely understand how he was still alive, let alone in control of something. The voice continued, informing him that he had just officially entered that dimension. The world around him began to change. The ruined city disappeared, and the furious monster on the other side of the barrier was the last thing he saw of that nightmare. When the light dissipated, Jong Gyeom found himself in a completely different place. A gigantic and silent warehouse, which he recognized right away. The drone that spoke to him was still there, hovering over the place. It was the only thing moving in that absolute silence. It dawned on him. He didn't just escape. He brought the entire warehouse with him. The question that echoed in his mind was whether he had actually stored the entire PAX distribution center, and it wasn't an empty copy. The drones and delivery robots continued their tasks, moving packages as if nothing had happened. Everything worked perfectly, completely isolated from the apocalypse happening outside. It was his private sanctuary. That's when he noticed something in his hand. A shining fragment, a mana stone, the source of all that unbelievable power. That was it. The small mana stone in his hands was the source of everything. The power that saved him from the monster and brought him to this private sanctuary. Outside, the world was hell. Monsters were destroying everything, and he was just another victim, about to be crushed without any chance of defense. He remembered the pure terror he felt. The creature was relentless, and there was nowhere to run. It was the end of the line, but he survived. Back in the silent reality of the warehouse, the memory of the danger only reinforced the miracle that had happened. Suddenly, a system screen appeared in front of him. It was a notification from the warehouse itself, the PAX Distribution Center, now classified as Level 1. The screen displayed the place's current capabilities. Delivery speed, the number of simultaneous shipments, and the maximum size of items that could be moved. Jong Gyeom began to understand that he wasn't just hiding there. He was the master of that place, and the system was showing him the rules of the game. The same drone that greeted him before approached again, ready to give more explanations about how that dimension worked. The explanation was direct. The mana stone he was holding was the energy source for the entire complex, but it would only last 24 hours. The small robot continued, explaining the consequences of letting the energy run out. The news made him tense. 24 hours. And then, what would happen to his only refuge when the energy ran out? As he thought about it, more drones came to life and began flying around the warehouse as if everything was normal. But the truth was different. The drone confirmed his worst fears. Without a proper energy source, the entire system and the stored products could suffer serious problems. But before despair hit, the drone changed the subject, presenting one of the warehouse's most important systems, PAX Fresh. It was a fresh food delivery system. Vegetables, meats, and even ready-made food, all stored and refrigerated. In a world in ruins, he had access to a feast. Despite the relief of having food, the reality was different. Without power, the warehouse would become a tomb. And outside, the monsters that caused all this were still waiting for him. Jong Gyeom needed answers. He called PAX and confirmed the problem. A single mana stone only guaranteed power for the warehouse for 24 hours. Time was running out. PAX then revealed the solution. There was a way to get more mana stones. But the method was dangerous. They could only be obtained by hunting infernal beings. The information weighed heavily on the young man. Infernal beings. He knew exactly what they were. The solution to his problem was facing the cause of all his trauma. To leave no doubt, the drone projected an image of one of the monsters. It was the same creature that haunted his nightmares, the same one that destroyed his world. At that moment, a system notification popped up. Apparently, by accepting this new reality as a hunter, something within the parallel dimension had changed. Suddenly, Jong Gyeom's attention was drawn elsewhere. An assistant robot approached, offering help to find any item he needed in the warehouse. If he was going to hunt, he would need a weapon. The young man began searching among the available items, analyzing the few options he had to fight for his life. After rummaging through a toolbox, he found something: a camping hatchet. It wasn't a real weapon, but it would have to do. It was the best he could manage. The robot informed him that the item stock was almost at an end. More bad news. Not only was the power limited, but the resources inside his refuge were also running out. His thoughts returned to the monster outside. He understood that the creature wasn't going anywhere. It was camped out there, patiently waiting for him to come out. With the hatchet in hand, Jong Gyeom faced the portal. The choice was simple: stay and wait for the end, or go out and fight for a chance to survive. But fear struck him. He wasn't a warrior. He knew he couldn't defeat that thing with a single blow. He needed a plan, not blind courage. Then, he changed his goal. The goal wasn't to kill, not yet. It was to wound the creature, create an opening and test its defenses. He prepared for the first attack. Without hesitation, Jong Gyeom threw the hatchet with all his might. The attack was a success, lodging directly into the monster. The first step of his plan was complete. The attack, which seemed certain, had no effect whatsoever. The creature didn't even move, revealing a defense that Jong Gyeom hadn't foreseen. His initial plan failed in the first second. Back in the warehouse, he faced the monster on the other side. Jong Gyeom knew that small weapons wouldn't even scratch that thing. He needed something much stronger. His mind raced in search of a solution. He concluded that only a heavier weapon, like an axe, would have any chance of piercing the enemy's defense. And there it was, a single axe inside the box. Jong Gyeom remembered that there should be one more in stock, but for now, that was the only one he could find. He turned to the assistant drone, asking about the whereabouts of the other axe. The machine responded that it needed to check the system database. While he waited, anxiety took over. His mind wouldn't stop, already thinking about alternatives. Maybe something heavy like a bowling ball could work where the blade failed. The drone finally finished its search, and Jong Gyeom turned, awaiting the answer that could define his survival. The information, however, didn't make sense. He clearly remembered seeing 15 axes before. Now, he couldn't find any of them. Where could they have gone? And then, he looked up. There they were, on top of one of the highest shelves in the warehouse, completely out of reach. The discovery was a bucket of cold water. He had an arsenal at his disposal, but he couldn't reach any of the weapons. The frustration was immense, but then, something incredible happened. The drone explained that the items in the warehouse were digital data, and if they were data, they could be copied. The axe in his hand began to multiply. The explanation continued. The items could be damaged or even modified, giving Jong Gyeom a range of possibilities he never imagined. And most importantly of all, the copied items would never run out. The stock was, for all intents and purposes, infinite. It finally clicked. Jong Gyeom realized that he wasn't in a simple warehouse, but in a place with unlimited resources. The balance of the fight had just turned in his favor. The drone just watched, as if waiting to see what the new master of that place would do with so much power in his hands. The decision now was all Jong Gyeom's. With the axe in his hands, Jong Gyeom's mind processed the new reality. If the items were infinite, that meant he could attack non-stop, without ever running out of ammunition. The drone then revealed a new ability. A portal opened, showing a perfect target to test the newly discovered power, a creature in another dimension. The explanation continued. He didn't even need to throw. The shipping ability allowed him to send the item automatically to the target, with a recharge time of 30 seconds. Jong Gyeom was perplexed. Shipping was a combat ability? For someone who worked in logistics, that didn't make any sense. Despite the confusion, there was no time to waste. With a target in front of him and a new ability to test, Jong Gyeom prepared to act. In the next instant, the axe disappeared from his hand and reappeared in the other dimension, lodging directly into the creature with brutal force. The drone remained motionless, just processing the data. The first test of the shipping ability had been an absolute success, and before Jong Gyeom could even assimilate what happened, a new axe materialized, delivered by the drone. The system was fast, almost instantaneous. The speed of the resupply caught him by surprise. He didn't even need to move to get another weapon. It simply appeared in his hand. That's when he understood. Shipping speed wasn't about delivering packages. It was about the speed with which he could attack and rearm for the next blow. With his mind racing, a new question arose. If this was a skill, like in a game, then maybe it could be improved. The drone promptly confirmed his suspicion. Skills could be strengthened using mana, opening a path to even greater power. Meanwhile, in the other dimension, the result of the test was clear. The creature didn't stand a chance against such a sudden and precise attack. The monster's body lay still, a silent testament to the destructive power that Jong Gyeom now controlled. A power he had barely begun to understand. The hesitation and despair from before were gone. With an infinite arsenal and upgradable skills, Jong Gyeom was ready to explore the full potential of the system. He asked to see the available equipment. With his new powers, Jong Gyeom knew he couldn't stand still any longer. It was time to act, to put a plan into practice. A mission began to form in his mind, a clear objective amidst the chaos. He opened a map to plot the route. The destination was Uijeongbu, and the journey through the destroyed city would be long and dangerous. But he was determined. There was no time to waste. His path would take him through Yong, passing through Dobong, until finally reaching his final objective. Analyzing the complete route, he confirmed that the distance was enormous. On foot, it would be an impossible task to accomplish in time. But distance wasn't his only concern. He just hoped the people he was looking for were still safe. Fortunately, he had a solution to the transportation problem. It wasn't a car or a motorcycle, but in today's world, that electric bicycle was a treasure. Practically a sports car. With a beam of light, the vehicle was ready to go. And then, he took the first pedal stroke. Crossing the ruined city, Jong Gyeom advanced. He was on his way to save those in need, a silent promise guiding his path. The night was dark and full of dangers, but his determination was the only light that mattered. Every meter traveled was a victory against despair. His journey had barely begun when a strange sound broke the silence of the night. Something was nearby, and out of nowhere a grotesque creature emerged, blocking his path with a deafening roar. Without time to think, he jumped off the bike. Using his skill, Jong Gyeom kicked the bike, which dematerialized and was sent straight towards the monster. The impact was brutal. The bike materialized with full force, but the creature managed to create a barrier, absorbing part of the damage and being thrown backwards. Jong Gyeom realized he was too distracted before to analyze the situation properly. Now, face to face with danger, he needed to understand what was happening. He wasted no time and launched a slashing attack, a blade of pure energy flying towards the enemy. The blow hit the monster's arm, but the metallic sound indicated that the damage was superficial. The creature's skin was more resistant than it seemed. The attack only served to enrage the beast even more, which growled in pain and hatred. He tried to attack again, but the blows hit an invisible barrier. That's when a system window appeared in front of him, revealing a problem. His main skill, shipping, was on cooldown. He needed to hold out for another 23 seconds without his best asset. The orc noticed the young man's hesitation. The creature knew it had the advantage now. And to make matters worse, out of nowhere, an axe began to materialize in front of the monster. The creature grabbed the weapon, now fully equipped for combat. Jong Gyeom's situation had just gotten much, much worse. The monster attacked without hesitation, but Jong Gyeom managed to defend himself at the last instant. A new skill had been activated, one he had almost forgotten. He remembered another skill he possessed. It wasn't for direct combat, but it could be the key to surviving that night. The skill was product recall. With it, he could bring back items he had already sent, but with one condition: he needed to defeat the monster first. After the victory, a monostone, the recovered item, appeared in front of him. The system confirmed the success of the operation. But something didn't add up. Jong Gyeom was sure he had never sent monostones in his old job. The origin of the item was a complete mystery. Putting aside his doubt, he decided to hurry to find a safe place for his family. But suddenly, a sharp scream cut through the silence of the night. Jong Gyeom stopped right away, feeling that something much worse was coming. A chill ran down his spine. The battle was far from over. He looked up at the sky and understood the source of the noise. The orcs weren't the only strange creatures that had invaded the city. A huge winged beast flew over the area, carrying prey in its claws. The young man assessed the new threat. With its wings spread, the creature was bigger than an orc and would be a formidable enemy. The sounds of destruction and monster screams echoed everywhere. The city was being devastated. Amidst the chaos, a different sound caught his attention. It wasn't a monster. It was a person. A man was running desperately for his life, fleeing the terror that was spreading through the streets. The man's escape ended. The creature hunting him dove from the skies, swift and sure. He didn't stand a chance. A single, violent blow sent him flying across the stone ground. His body rolled uncontrollably down the destroyed street. The young man ran to help, shouting for the man to get up. But it was too late. The creature landed with a crash, blocking any escape route. Fallen and injured, the man was paralyzed by pure terror. The beast approached, drooling. To it, he was just the next meal. But then, the young man stepped in the way. He wasn't going to stand by and watch. The monster's attention turned to the new obstacle. The fallen man looked up, shocked. Someone was actually risking their life to save him. That's when the protagonist noticed something strange. The creature wasn't attacking him. Its eyes were fixed on the man. He wondered if Senor Choi was always the target. On the ground, Senor Choi writhed in pain, completely vulnerable. The monster simply ignored the young man and grabbed its true prey. The protagonist's hand trembled. He wanted to act, but what could he do against a monster that size? Hesitation paralyzed him for a moment. From afar, another man watched the whole scene, with an expression of panic and urgency. Without wasting time, he pressed a button on a small device on his belt, and suddenly, a flash of light exploded in the middle of the city, drawing everyone's attention, including the creatures. The creature's attack was imminent. The man could only wait for the end, paralyzed by the fear that consumed him completely. But then, a sharp sound cut through the air. Confused, he looked up, not understanding what was happening amidst the chaos. Shock took over his face. He simply couldn't believe what his eyes were seeing. Out of nowhere, a fast, black blur struck the creature in mid-flight with brutal force. The monster plummeted from the sky, falling with a dull thud and raising a cloud of dust. An axe was embedded directly in the beast's head. It had been a single, precise blow. The survivor was speechless. Someone had just taken down a wyvern right in front of him. That's when he looked to the side, noticing a figure approaching amidst the destruction. A young man, visibly injured and panting, stopped his bicycle in front of them. With a tired voice, he asked if everyone was okay. The two men looked at the newcomer, completely stunned by the scene. It just wasn't sinking in. They wondered if that young man had really killed a monster like that. On a bicycle. The protagonist just watched in silence, waiting for an answer. One of the men, in a gesture of pure gratitude, bowed deeply, thanking who he believed to be a soldier. The protagonist corrected their assumption. He pointed to the uniform, explaining that he wasn't a soldier, but just a PAX warehouse employee. The revelation left the two men even more shocked. It didn't compute. This young man had taken down a flying monster with an axe while riding a bicycle. The young man then changed the subject, wanting to know if there were more survivors nearby. One of the men, more relieved, answered his question. The answer, however, was grim. He explained that at first there were many people, but the situation changed drastically. The monsters also appeared in packs, and most did not survive the initial attack. The few who remained, about 15 people, had to take refuge in the basement of a terminal, an area with fewer monsters. Faced with the situation, one of the survivors invited him to join their group, offering a safe place to stay. The protagonist seemed to ponder the offer. There was something else at stake there. The mention that they were looking for a road for a functional car caught his attention. The information was what he was really after. The men thanked him once again, reinforcing that the young man literally saved them from death, and that guiding him to the shelter was the least they could do. Only, before they left, something on the ground caught everyone's attention. The little wyvern he had knocked down was holding an item that began to glow intensely. Suddenly, the crystal flew towards the protagonist, who caught it in the air without difficulty. He knew that those men had no idea of the real extent of his abilities. They saw a bike delivery guy, not the hunter he really was. The man could barely breathe, exhausted after the battle. But the determination in his gaze showed that he wasn't finished yet. Upon arriving at what was supposed to be a shelter, the protagonist and the other workers came across a scene of pure chaos. A single man stood amidst the carnage. The young man froze. He had just fought for his life, but what he saw there was a massacre on a completely different scale. Cold sweat ran down his face. That place, which was supposed to be the safest, had become a battlefield. Dozens of people were scattered on the floor, and in the center of it all, the man and the creature he had defeated. One of the survivors approached the fighter, trying to rationalize what had happened. He suggested that maybe an orc had gotten lost and arrived there by chance. But the older man's look said something else. He knew it hadn't been an accident. There was something very wrong going on. On the ground, The defeated monster was proof that the supposed safety of the shelter was just an illusion. The protagonist remembered the promise that monsters didn't attack that place, a lie that cost the lives of many. He swallowed hard, fear taking over. If they weren't even safe there, where could they go? Meanwhile, one of the men the protagonist saved earlier introduced him to another group, explaining that he had also saved them from a wyvern. Finally, the two fighters stood face to face. The air became heavy, charged with a silent tension. The young man felt the weight of the other man's gaze, a veteran who had clearly seen much more than him. The other survivors whispered, impressed. They said that the man had killed a wyvern with an axe, with enough force to crack the creature's skull. Then, the older fighter extended his hand towards the protagonist, a gesture that would change everything. The older man grabbed the protagonist's hand with surprising strength. It wasn't just a handshake, but a gesture full of gratitude for everything the young man had done for them. One of the men he saved couldn't hide his joy. He thanked him effusively, saying that they would never be able to repay the favor of saving their friends. The excitement was so great that the man grabbed him by the clothes, leaving the protagonist completely speechless with the intensity of that thanks. He insisted, asking how they could repay the debt they owed him. For that group of survivors, the protagonist's act was nothing short of heroic. The protagonist tried to dodge, saying it was no big deal, but the man interpreted that as a sign of humility, becoming even more impressed with the young man. The hero's shy reaction made the other survivors laugh. Not knowing what to say, the protagonist just apologized, totally lost in the situation. Seeing the confusion, the older man stepped in to intervene. He explained that everyone there had been working together for over 10 years and were like a family. He then introduced himself formally. His name was Jinmok Lee, the manager of the cargo terminal where they were sheltered. To the protagonist's surprise, the manager bowed in a gesture of deep respect, a treatment he definitely didn't expect. Jinmok Lee invited him to enter the hideout. He assured him that they had saved water and food from the warehouse, and that the young man could finally rest safely. The manager continued, proudly explaining that they had a good stock of food, and that, if it ran out, they could simply get more from the warehouse. But in the middle of the explanation, Jinmok hesitated. The confidence in his voice suddenly disappeared, and his expression changed completely. An odd silence fell over the group. The welcoming atmosphere from before gave way to a tension that no one there could understand. It was then that the protagonist delivered the news that would change everything. The warehouse, their source of supplies, had simply disappeared. Jinmok couldn't process the information. Desperate, the manager turned to one of his men, hoping it was some kind of joke, but the look of dread on his colleague's face confirmed the worst. Their only hope was gone. The news landed like a bomb. The survivors panicked, refusing to believe that their only source of hope had simply vanished. For Jinmok Lee, the manager, the reality was a hard blow. The perfect plan he had drawn up for his people had fallen apart in an instant. The tension was suffocating. With the warehouse out of the question, the future of everyone there became a big, scary unknown. But, even shaken, Jinmok tried to raise the group's morale. He said it wasn't a time for despair, just to move up the escape plan. The leader's determination rubbed off on the others. They knew that the only option was to move forward and face whatever was in the tunnel. Jinmok then explained the situation to the protagonist. To escape, they would need cars, since everyone lived in distant places. The problem, however, was not the lack of vehicles. The real challenge was the roads, which were completely destroyed and impassable. With the highway to the south in ruins, the only escape route left was the tunnel to the west. It was their last chance. The protagonist listened to everything carefully, realizing that the situation was even more complicated than he imagined. It was then that Jinmok revealed the final obstacle. The tunnel was infested with wyverns. The original plan was to accumulate resources to get past them little by little, a plan that was now impossible. Upon hearing this, the young man's expression changed. For him, monsters were not a dead end. He assured them that he could eliminate them all with his ability. The protagonist's confidence was so great that he even laughed, relieved. For Jinmok, hearing that was like a new wave of hope amidst the chaos. But the conversation was interrupted by a buzzing in the air. A surveillance drone suddenly appeared, hovering over the group. The drone flew towards a portal that opened in the middle of the destruction, revealing that they were not alone in that place. Meanwhile, the body of one of the slain monsters began to disintegrate, revealing a glowing mana core inside it. The mana cores of the slain monsters were sucked towards the portal, as if they were being collected by an invisible force, all under the watchful eye of the drone. Jong Gyeom then turned to the manager, handing him a device. He warned that the only way to protect him was if the man stayed very close to him, without questioning. The manager, still processing everything, just agreed, not really understanding what was happening. The situation was much bigger than he imagined. Fear took over Jin-mok. He was just a warehouse manager, and now he was in the middle of a battle against monsters from another world. And the reason for the warning became clear. From the portal, a winged creature emerged, advancing directly against the two. There was no time to think. In the last second, an energy barrier materialized, blocking the creature's attack with a violent impact. Surprisingly, it was Jin-mok himself who conjured the shield. Even terrified, he used his ability to protect himself from the fatal blow. The force of the impact, however, was brutal, throwing the manager away and breaking his defense. He fell hard to the ground, completely vulnerable. Seeing his companion in danger, Jong Gyeom prepared to intercept the creature, which was now circling in the sky, ready for the next attack. With a simple gesture, the protagonist activated his own ability, aiming directly at the monster flying above them. The creature, caught by surprise, was pulled down with an irresistible force, completely losing control of its flight. The aerial predator became prey, falling towards the ground without any chance of reacting. But Jin-mok shouted in despair. He realized too late Jong Gyeom's true intention. It wasn't an attack, it was bait. Jong Gyeom had used one of the survivors, trapped inside a portal, and threw him directly into the creature's mouth. A cruel but effective tactic. The creature snapped up the bait without hesitation. The sound of the crack confirmed the tragic end of the survivor, a necessary sacrifice in Jong Gyeom's plan. With the monster distracted, the real attack finally began. A massive force hit the creature head-on, knocking it out of the sky once and for all. Fallen on the ground, Jin-mok watched everything, paralyzed. He couldn't believe the cruelty of the plan, even though it was working perfectly. But Jong Gyeom didn't show any emotion. He just analyzed the situation with a calculating coldness, as if everything was just another step to be completed. Jin-mok's mind went back to a conversation they had before. Jong Gyeom had explained that his ability involved using a truck to get rid of weaker monsters. He had said that for him, the vehicle was purely a means of transportation, a way to move safely across the battlefield. At that moment, Jin-mok tried to understand the logic behind it, questioning why anyone would need a car in the middle of the apocalypse. It was then that Jong Gyeom began to reveal the true and shocking purpose behind his ability. Back in the present, the answer was right in front of them. A portal opened, and the threat of the wyverns, the winged creatures, became real and immediate. While Jin-mok was sweating with the sight, Jong Gyeom remained impassive. He was already expecting it. In fact, he had provoked the situation himself. Amidst the wreckage of the battle, something on the ground caught Jin-mok's attention. A shining stone, pulsing with an unknown energy. Jong Gyeom explained that it was a mana stone, surprised that Jin-mok had never seen one. The item floated towards him, along with his weapon. The revelation caught Jin-mok by surprise. The idea that his abilities could get stronger using those items opened a new world of possibilities in his mind. Jong Gyeom continued, explaining that each ability worked in a different way and that mana cores were essential for the growth of an awakened. Finally, Jin-mok understood the true nature of his companion's power. It wasn't just a truck, it was a weapon, a pax that fired axes as if they were bullets. After the revelation about his power, Jong Gyeom gave a look that ended the matter. For him, the conversation and the partnership had come to an end. His coldness caught Jin-mok completely by surprise. He couldn't believe that he would simply be discarded like that. Jin-mok froze for a moment, trying to understand how someone could be so indifferent after everything they had been through together. Jong Gyeom then thanked him for his help in finding the way and said that it was time to go back. With a gesture of reverence, Jin-mak tried to appeal to his good sense, but it was no use. Jong Gyeom turned his back, ready to leave alone. Seeing his only hope go away, Jin-mak questioned him about his destination, wanting to know why he needed a car. The question made Jong Gyeom stop for a moment. He didn't turn around, but at least he was listening. In desperation, Jin-mak revealed that he needed to get to Indeogwon, which was on the way to Gangnam, Jong Gyeom's likely destination. He then begged Jong Gyeom to take him along, taking advantage of the fact that they were going in the same direction. The answer, however, was silence. Jong Gyeom started walking again, leaving Jin-mak behind. It was a reality check. Jin-mak realized that, alone in that place, his chances of surviving were minimal, but he still had an ace up his sleeve. He reminded Jong Gyeom that, while one was the fighter, the other was the driver. They needed each other. Jin-mak insisted on the proposal, arguing that with his driving skill, he could get them to their destination much faster. It was a win-win situation for both. The logic of the agreement finally seemed to penetrate Jong Gyeom's coldness, who stopped to consider the offer. Seeing that he had his attention, Jin-mak gave the ultimatum. He made it clear that if he didn't take him along, Jong Gyeom wouldn't get the car key at all. Surrounded on all sides, Jong Gyeom pondered the situation. Revealing his abilities, there would be a waste of time. He decided that, for now, he could trust Jin-mak to solve that. The decision was made. Jong Gyeom finally accepted the proposal and told Jin-mak to take him to Indeogwon. The deal was sealed. Relief took over Jin-mak, who could barely contain his joy. He had finally gotten what he wanted, securing his ride out of that hell. Only the deal came with a condition. Jong Gyeom made it clear that he would not take anyone else. The crowd would only get in the way, and he preferred to keep his abilities a secret. Without hesitation, Jin-mak accepted the condition. He assured that he would be able to convince the group to cooperate, and asked Jong Gyeom to leave everything to him. With renewed confidence, Jin-mak turned to the group. He needed to dismiss everyone without causing problems, and he knew exactly what to say. The plan worked. Sometime later, they were already on the road, but they found a blocked tunnel. There was no other way but to open it. With the tunnel blocked, the way forward seemed impossible. But after everything they'd been through, giving up wasn't an option. Someone needed to go ahead and find a way to clear the path for the rest of the group. Only what awaited them on the other side was a real nightmare. A swarm of hungry wyverns completely blocked the way, and they didn't seem happy about the visit at all. They didn't seem friendly at all. The creature's high-pitched screams confirmed the worst suspicions. Advancing through there would be suicide. Faced with that scene, he locked the bicycle instantly. Retreating was not an option, but advancing seemed like a direct invitation to death. At that moment, he understood the gravity of the situation. It was no longer a question of fear or courage, but rather about the consequences of doing absolutely nothing. The penny had finally dropped, and the anger came with everything. He wasn't going to stand by and watch everything happen anymore. Someone needed to take action, and that person would be him. And the first target of his newfound determination was the girl next to him. Caught completely off guard, she could barely process the sudden outburst of anger coming from him. The situation got completely out of control. The man, caught in the crossfire, was paralyzed by the shouting, not knowing how to calm the two young people down. Faced with that mess, the older man didn't feel anger. On the contrary, a nostalgic memory came to his mind, bringing a smile to his face. He remembered a simpler time, when the fights between his children were just part of the daily routine of the house, a sign that everything was normal. That day, he decided to take advantage of the fight to teach a lesson about unity, trying to turn the chaos into a moment of learning. With all the seriousness of a father, he explained how precious and important family was, hoping that the words would have some effect. Only the lesson was interrupted by the true authority of the house. Their mother appeared, not happy with the mess, and the sermon changed targets. The children's focus changed instantly. Formerly enemies, now they were a united audience, watching from the box seats as their father was about to get scolded. Little Jong Gyeom understood everything. That wink to his sister was a sign of complicity. That was the true meaning of family for them. That memory brought warmth to Jong Gyeom's heart, even if only for a brief moment. a time that seemed very, very distant from his current reality, because the reality now was different. Amidst the mess at work, his boss broke down in tears, drowning his sorrows in a bottle. The man cried desperately for how much he missed his son, while the others tried, unsuccessfully, to take the drink from his hands. The night wore on, and the sound of crying and confusion gave way to silence. Eventually, exhaustion and drink won. Everyone ended up passed out on the floor in a deep and oblivious sleep. Everyone, except Jong Gyeom. Annoyed, he decided to get up to go to the bathroom, being the only sober one in that desolate environment. He looked at his colleagues scattered on the floor. The scene was pathetic, but it also made him feel even more out of place and lonely. Needing a breather, Jong Gyeom decided to go out for some air, but ended up finding 2 other colleagues who had also escaped that situation. In the darkness of a truck yard, Jin-mok Lee moved cautiously. He felt that something was out of place and needed to find out what it was. Suddenly, he noticed a movement. He wasn't alone there. Hidden, he spotted Jong Gyeom, who seemed to be in the middle of some heavy work, moving boxes into one of the containers. Jin-mok Lee approached, confused. He couldn't understand why the protagonist would be doing that alone, in the middle of the night. Observing Jong Gyeom, who acted with impressive calm, Jin-mok began to suspect that he was facing something much bigger than he imagined. It was then that Jong Gyeom opened the door of one of the trucks. The sight of what was inside left Jin-mok completely speechless. Shocked by the amount of supplies, he heard the protagonist explain that this was only half the load, as he feared the truck would get too heavy. Jin-mok's mind simply couldn't process the information. Incredulous, he asked if Jong Gyeom had loaded all 15 trucks in the yard with that absurd amount of stuff. As Jong Gyeom opened another container, Jin-mok felt a chill. He knew the man was strong, but this was a surreal level of preparation. He began to question the true extent of his new partner's abilities. What kind of person could do all that? Jong Gyeom then showed him the reason for so much preparation. Visions of a massacre, with winged creatures destroying everything and everyone in their path. He revealed how he faced terrible monsters, using an energy barrier to corner the threats and protect himself from attacks. With frightening calm, the protagonist demonstrated how he eliminated these creatures, one by one, without even flinching. Finally, Jong Gyeom revealed his biggest secret, questioning his system about the possibility of taking other people to his parallel dimension. Jin-mok finally understood. He wasn't dealing with a simple survivor. The system's response was clear and direct. It was impossible to take other people to the parallel dimension with the current level. The plan to take Jin-mok to a safe place wouldn't work. The status screen confirmed the problem. The dimension was only at level 1, and he needed 100 mana stones for the next level. He only had 32. Faced with the obstacle, Jong Gyeom didn't hesitate. If the level was the problem, then he just needed to level up. The solution was simple, but the execution would be dangerous. He decided that he would evolve his skill right there. The tunnel was still infested with creatures, the perfect hunting ground to get the resources he needed. The place was a real wyvern nest. Dozens of them still flew through the darkness, ready to attack anyone who dared enter their territory. They weren't easy prey. They were territorial and extremely aggressive predators, and Jong Gyeom was about to invade their home. But the protagonist showed no fear. He just calculated the risks and prepared for what was to come. The hunt was about to begin. Meanwhile, outside the tunnel, the other survivors waited, completely oblivious to what was happening inside. The tension in the air was palpable. The worry was visible on everyone's face. They wondered if the young man who entered the tunnel alone would really be okay. The wait was agonizing. Suddenly, a noise startled them. Everyone turned towards the sound, expecting the worst. But it wasn't a monster. It was Jong Gyeom, calmly emerging from the darkness of the tunnel, riding a bicycle. The scene was so surreal that one of the survivors couldn't even process it properly. After all that, he just rode out of there on a bike? Only when he got closer did everyone notice the most important detail. He was covered in blood. But it didn't seem to be his blood. Worry turned to relief and admiration. The unlikely hero had returned, and everyone celebrated his return, celebrating the man who cleared the path for them. With the path clear, Jin-Mok Lee gathered the group. He thanked everyone for their patience and for working together under his makeshift leadership during the crisis. Jin-Mok Lee concluded the instructions, making sure everyone knew the plan to move forward. The hardest part was over, at least for now. He gave one last mysterious piece of advice. If they encountered any kind of problem along the way, they should open the truck's cargo that he was driving. Jong Gyeom, still covered in blood, didn't quite understand the warning, but the urgency of the moment left no room for questions. The general feeling was one of relief and haste. After being trapped for so long, everyone just wanted to get back on the road to finally reunite with their families. But the road ahead was not easy at all. The road was congested with abandoned cars and wreckage, a constant reminder of the chaos that had taken hold. Even so, they moved forward. The first truck left the tunnel, leading the makeshift convoy along the dangerous route. The survivors said goodbye with a wave, each leaving for their own destination, but united by the same hope of finding safety. The two trucks followed different routes, moving further and further apart on the destroyed road. Everyone's journey continued, now separated. What they didn't know was that a new threat, much larger and more imposing, was already watching them from afar. A creature that appeared to be the leader of the monsters. Already inside one of the vehicles, Jong Gyeom remained silent. The victory in the tunnel brought no peace, only the certainty that the fight was far from over. Suddenly, a strange noise broke the monotony of the engine, causing the young man to look up suspiciously. The truck began to lose speed, stopping in the middle of a completely devastated city. The silence outside was terrifying. The driver, Jin-Mok Lee, understood the situation. There was no avoiding what was to come. The road ahead was impassable, a graveyard of cars, monsters, and victims. Detouring was not an option. They would have to go through hell. Jin-Mok Lee's truck stopped completely. Before them, the city was a silent tomb, and the only way was through it. The streets were a testament to the end of the world, a place where hope had rotted along with everything else. Amidst the wreckage, creatures fed on the fallen. Jong Gyeom thought that, for a matter of months, one of those bodies could have been his. But fear gave way to determination. He hadn't survived this far to die as an extra in this tragedy. Carefully, Jin-Mok Lee maneuvered the vehicle through the makeshift barricade. Every inch advanced was a calculated risk. The driver realized that the barbed wire was the work of the army, a desperate attempt to contain whatever was on the other side. The scene was worse than he imagined, and the route he knew was completely compromised. Jin-Mok Lee began to think about a detour, but Jong Gyeom asked him to wait. The young man had seen something moving at the end of the bridge. A pack of beasts roamed the passage, sniffing the air. They were the guardians of that concrete graveyard, creatures that seemed to have come out of a nightmare, hungry and ready to attack anything that moved. While Jin-Mok Lee panicked, a daring thought crossed Jong Gyeom's mind. Those creatures weren't just an obstacle, they were an opportunity to get stronger. A quick glance was enough. He already had a plan in mind, as insane as it seemed. The truck stopped near the edge. Jong Gyeom pointed to a small passage, a narrow path that skirted the main blockade. It was their only chance, but it was dangerously close to the horde of monsters. Jin-Mok Lee questioned the sanity of the plan, but Jong Gyeom just confirmed it. He wasn't asking for permission. With a frightening calm, Jong Gyeom gave the order to go straight to meet the beasts. For him, this was not a path to death, but the only way to achieve his true goal.